The clatter of silverware hitting the floor still rings in my head. 2 days of my wife's careful preparation wiped out in 30 seconds by my own son's fury. But that moment, when Pierce overturned Reina's Christmas table and said I'd fade away, forgotten and alone, that's when I knew exactly what had to be done. My name is Brooks Carven, and I built Carven Restaurant Group from nothing. 58 years old, 26 years of marriage to Reina, and 32 years of watching my son become someone I barely recognize. This Christmas changed everything. December 23rd started like any other holiday preparation. Reina had been in the kitchen since dawn, arranging the centerpiece for the third time. She'd spent Tuesday shopping for specific ingredients, Wednesday prepping side dishes, and now she was perfecting every detail. The dining room looked like a magazine spread, burgundy tablecloth, gold chargers, crystal glasses catching the afternoon light streaming through our bay window. "Brooks, does this look centered to you?" Reina called from the dining room, adjusting the winter flower arrangement she'd spent an hour creating. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing quarterly reports. Even on holidays, the business demanded attention. "It's perfect, honey. Just like every year?" She smiled, that satisfied expression she got when everything aligned with her vision. Reina took pride in these moments, creating beauty, bringing family together, maintaining traditions. After 26 years of marriage, I'd learned to appreciate her dedication to these details that made our house feel like home. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 o'clock. Pierce had always been punctual when it served his purposes. "Dad!" Pierce's voice boomed through the hallway as he entered without waiting for us to answer. Behind him, Lumi clicked across our hardwood floors in heels that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Hello, sweetheart." Reina embraced our son, then turned to Lumi with the same warmth she'd shown for the past 3 years. "Lumi, you look beautiful. How was the drive?" "Traffic was horrible," Lumi replied, already scanning the room with calculating eyes. "But Pierce insisted we come early to talk to you both about something important." Pierce had inherited my height, but none of my restraint. At 32, he carried himself like someone who'd never faced real consequences. His expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and confident swagger all projected success. Success built on my foundation, though he seemed to forget that detail. "The table looks incredible, Mom," Pierce said, giving Reina a quick hug before immediately pulling out his phone. "Listen, we need to discuss something before dinner." I closed my laptop and joined them in the dining room. Pierce had positioned himself at the head of the table, my usual spot, while Lumi examined Reina's place settings like she was appraising jewelry. "What's on your mind, son?" Pierce exchanged a look with Lumi before launching into what sounded like a rehearsed presentation. "Well, Dad, we've been thinking about our image in the community. Lumi's been invited to join the Riverside Country Club's board, and honestly, her current car doesn't really fit the role." Lumi nodded seriously, as if this were a matter of national importance. "The other board members all drive luxury vehicles. It's about positioning, Brooks. You understand business." I did understand business. I understood it well enough to know when someone was trying to manipulate me with buzzwords and social pressure. "What exactly are you asking for?" "A new car," Pierce said casually, as if requesting a cup of coffee. "Nothing crazy. Maybe a BMW X7 or an Audi Q8. Something that reflects our family's success." Reina had stopped adjusting the centerpiece and was listening quietly. She knew my expressions well enough to recognize the warning signs. "Those vehicles cost around $70,000, I said calmly. "Right, but think of it as an investment," Lumi jumped in. "My board position could bring networking opportunities for the restaurants. It's really about expanding our reach." Our reach. As if Lumi had contributed anything to building Carven Restaurant Group beyond marrying my son. "Pierce, you're 32 years old. You have a job, a salary, and your own responsibilities. If you want a $70,000 car, you can finance it yourself." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Pierce's confident expression shifted to something harder. "Dad, come on, don't be like this. It's Christmas." "Being like what? Expecting my adult son to pay for his own luxury purchases?" Lumi's face flushed. "Brooks, I think you're missing the bigger picture here. This isn't just about a car, it's about supporting family and recognizing opportunities. I recognize opportunities just fine. I also recognize the difference between needs and wants." Pierce stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what, Dad? I'm getting really tired of your attitude lately. You act like you're doing me some huge favor by letting me work at the restaurants, but the truth is, you need me more than I need you." "Is that so?" "Yeah, that's so. Who do you think handles the day-to-day operations while you sit in your office looking at spreadsheets? Who deals with the staff, the suppliers, the actual work?" I could have pointed out that handling operations meant showing up late, ignoring vendor complaints, and making impulsive decisions that I quietly corrected later. I could have mentioned the 3 major suppliers who'd specifically requested to work with other managers. I could have shared the staff feedback surveys that consistently rated Pierce as their least effective supervisor. Instead, I simply said, "The answer is still no." That's when Pierce lost control completely. "Fine. You want to be a selfish old man? You want to hoard your money like some kind of miser?" He gestured wildly, his arm sweeping toward the carefully set table. "You think this matters? You think any of this matters?" His hand caught the edge of the tablecloth, and everything happened in slow motion. Plates crashed to the floor, crystal glasses shattered against the hardwood, and 2 days of Reina's careful work scattered across our dining room like debris from an explosion. Reina gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she watched the destruction. Pierce stood in the wreckage, breathing hard, his face red with anger. "There. Now you know what I think of your precious traditions and your tight-fisted control." But he wasn't finished. "You know what's going to happen to you, Dad? One day you're going to be sitting in this big empty house, counting your money, and you'll realize that nobody cares about you anymore. Your precious business won't matter. Your control won't matter. You'll just be a forgotten old man who chose money over family." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper that somehow felt louder than shouting. "You're nothing without us. When we're gone, you'll end up exactly what you deserve, forgotten and alone." The silence that followed was deafening. Reina stood frozen among the broken glass and scattered food. Lumi looked uncomfortable for the first time since arriving, as if she hadn't expected Pierce to go this far. And I stood there, looking at my son, really looking at him, and realized I was seeing a stranger. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my house. Both of you." Pierce laughed, but it sounded forced. "Dad, come on, don't be dramatic. It's just a table." "It's not about the table. Get out." Lumi tugged on Pierce's arm. "Maybe we should go. Let everyone cool down." As they gathered their coats and headed for the door, Pierce turned back one more time. "You'll regret this, Dad. When you need us, and you will, remember this moment. Remember that you chose pride over family." The front door slammed, leaving Reina and me standing in the ruins of Christmas dinner. She knelt down and began picking up pieces of her favorite serving bowl, the one her mother had given her as a wedding gift. Her hands were shaking. "Leave it," I said gently. "I'll clean this up." 2 days, she whispered. "I spent 2 days making everything perfect." I knelt beside her and took the broken ceramic from her hands. I know. I'm sorry." "He's your son, Brooks." "No," I said, looking at the destruction around us. "My son wouldn't have done this." As I helped Reina to the kitchen and began the process of cleaning up the mess, one thought kept running through my mind. Pierce was right about one thing. This moment would be remembered, but not for the reasons he thought. That night, after the last piece of glass had been swept up and the dining room returned to some semblance of order, I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. I had work to do. The next morning brought clarity that only comes after a sleepless night of hard thinking. I'd spent hours in my office, not working on restaurant business, but reviewing the pattern I'd been ignoring for years. Pierce's explosion wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a long series of escalating entitlement. Reina was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, moving slowly as she prepared coffee. The dining room remained closed off, neither of us ready to face that space yet. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked without turning around. "Some." I poured myself coffee and sat at the breakfast bar. "Reina, we need to talk about Pierce." She finally looked at me, and I could see she'd been crying. "He's been under a lot of stress lately. The holidays, Lumi's expectations, trying to prove himself at work. This isn't about stress. Brooks, when did he start believing he was entitled to whatever he wanted? When did we stop being parents and become ATM machines?" Reina set down her mug harder than necessary. "That's not fair. We've always supported him." "Have we supported him, or have we enabled him?" The question hung in the air between us. I could see Reina wrestling with it, her natural instinct to protect our son warring with what she'd witnessed yesterday. "Tell me honestly," I continued, "when was the last time Pierce faced a real consequence for his actions?" She was quiet for a long moment. "You're talking about our child." "I'm talking about a 32-year-old man who thinks he can destroy our home and threaten us when he doesn't get his way." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Pierce, Dad, I think we both said things we didn't mean yesterday. Let's talk this through like adults." I showed Reina the message. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, just an expectation that we'd move past it because he was ready to. He wants to talk, Reina said hopefully. He wants to manipulate. There's a difference. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I drove to Pierce's restaurant location, one of 3 properties in our group. As the founder and majority owner, I had access to everything, though I'd given Pierce considerable autonomy over the past 2 years, maybe too much autonomy. The morning shift was in full swing when I arrived. The hostess, Jennifer, looked surprised to see me. "Mr. Carven, we weren't expecting you today." "Is Pierce in?" Her expression shifted slightly. "He's not here yet. He usually comes in around 11 on Fridays." It was 9:30, during the breakfast rush at a restaurant that opened at 7. I made my way to Pierce's office, using my master key to enter. What I found was telling. A desk covered with unopened vendor invoices, 3 weeks' worth of scheduling requests from staff, and a stack of customer complaint forms that hadn't been addressed. But it was the computer that revealed the real story. Pierce had left himself logged into the management system, and his recent activity painted a clear picture. Over the past month, he'd approved overtime for his friends while denying it for more senior staff. He'd changed supplier orders without checking inventory, resulting in waste. Most concerning, he'd been comping meals for people without documenting reasons, a practice that could indicate anything from poor judgment to outright theft. "Mr. Carven?" I turned to find Miles, the assistant manager, standing in the doorway. He was 26, had worked his way up from server, and was one of our most reliable employees. "Miles, how are things running?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Fine, sir. Everything's fine." "That's not what I asked. How are things really running?" Miles glanced around nervously before stepping into the office and closing the door. "Sir, I don't want to speak out of turn." "You won't be. I need honest feedback." "The staff is frustrated. Mr. Pierce. He's been making a lot of changes without consulting anyone. The new scheduling system he implemented doesn't account for our peak hours, so we're constantly understaffed when we need people most." "What else?" "The vendors are complaining about late payments, not because we don't have money, but because Pierce doesn't process the invoices. I've been trying to handle it, but I don't have authorization for payments over $500. I looked at the stack of unpaid invoices on the desk. Several were over $1,000 and marked final notice. "Why haven't you called me about this?" Miles shifted uncomfortably. "Pierce said he'd handle it. He said you didn't want to be bothered with operational details anymore." "That was news to me. Miles, from now on, you report problems directly to me. Understood?" "Yes, sir." After Miles left, I spent 2 hours going through Pierce's files. The picture that emerged was of someone playing at being a manager while avoiding actual responsibility. He'd hired friends for positions they weren't qualified for, ignored cost controls I'd spent years implementing, and created an atmosphere where serious problems were either ignored or passed up the chain without resolution. Most damaging, he'd been telling staff that I was stepping back from day-to-day operations and that all decisions now went through him. This explained why I'd been receiving fewer status reports and why several department heads had seemed distant during recent meetings. My phone rang. "Pierce." "Dad, I stopped by the house, but Mom said you weren't there. Where are you?" "At your restaurant." A pause. "Why?" "Reviewing operations. We need to talk." "I'm kind of busy today. Can it wait until Monday?" "No." Another pause, longer this time. "Fine, I'll be there in an hour." He arrived 90 minutes later, looking annoyed. "Dad, what's this about? If you're still upset about yesterday." "Sit down." Pierce remained standing. "I don't appreciate being summoned like an employee." "You are an employee. Sit down." He finally sat, crossing his arms defensively. "This is ridiculous." I slid the stack of overdue invoices across the desk. "Explain these." Pierce barely glanced at them. "Paperwork gets behind sometimes. It's not a big deal." 3 vendors have threatened to stop deliveries." "How is that not a big deal?" "They're bluffing. They need our business more than we need them." "Really?" "Because Thompson Produce called our main office yesterday asking if we were having financial problems. They've been waiting 60 days for payment on a $1,200 invoice." Pierce's confidence wavered slightly. "I've been busy with other priorities." "Such as?" "Managing staff, dealing with customer issues, planning improvements." I pulled up the scheduling system on his computer and turned the monitor toward him. "This is your new scheduling system. Do you see the problem?" He looked at the screen with growing discomfort. "What problem?" "You've scheduled 2 servers for Sunday brunch. We serve 300 customers on Sunday morning. How exactly do you think 2 servers will handle that?" "They'll figure it out. Good staff adapts. Good management doesn't put staff in impossible situations." For the next hour, I walked Pierce through every operational failure I'd discovered. The unauthorized comp meals, the poor hiring decisions, the ignored vendor relationships, the staff complaints he'd dismissed without investigation. With each example, Pierce became more defensive and less coherent in his explanations. Dad, you're nitpicking. Every business has these kinds of minor issues. Minor? Pierce, you're driving away experienced staff and reliable vendors. You're creating problems that take weeks to fix. Maybe the problem is that you won't let me actually manage. You're always looking over my shoulder, questioning my decisions. When have I questioned your decisions? All the time. You act like I don't know what I'm doing. I leaned back in the chair and really looked at my son. Pierce, do you know what you're doing? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Of course I do. Then why are we having this conversation? He stood up abruptly. Because you can't stand that I might do things differently than you. You want me to be your clone, to run everything exactly the way you would. I want you to be competent. The word hit him like a physical blow. His face flushed red, and for a moment I thought he might flip this desk too. I'm competent. I'm more than competent. The problem is you can't let go of control. Pierce, in the past month, you've cost us 2 reliable vendors, 3 experienced employees, and approximately $8,000 in waste and poor decisions. How is that competent? Those numbers are exaggerated. They're documented. Would you like me to show you the spreadsheet? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window. When he finally spoke, his voice had taken on the same cruel edge I'd heard yesterday. You know what I think, Dad? I think you're threatened by me. I think you're worried that I might actually be better at this than you are. Better at what? Alienating staff, ignoring vendors, creating chaos? Better at connecting with people. Better at seeing the big picture instead of obsessing over every tiny detail. I almost laughed. What big picture is that? Growth, expansion, taking risks instead of playing it safe like some scared old man. What risks have you taken, Pierce? I've modernized our approach. I've brought fresh ideas. Name one. He struggled for a moment before saying, the new scheduling system. The one that leaves us understaffed during peak hours? It's more efficient. For whom? Pierce's frustration was building toward another explosion. I could see it in his posture, his clenched fists, the way his breathing had become shallow. Dad, I don't know what you want from me. Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. I want you to do your job competently. That's all I've ever wanted. My job? This is supposed to be my inheritance. This business belongs to me too. And there it was, the real issue. Pierce didn't see himself as an employee working to earn a position. He saw himself as an heir waiting to claim his birthright. Pierce, nothing belongs to you. You work here because I gave you a job. You have authority because I delegated it. You earn your position every day through your performance. That's not how family businesses work. It's how this family business works. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, weighing his options, deciding how far to push. We'll see about that, he said finally. What does that mean? It means I'm not the only one with opinions about how this business should be run. Maybe it's time for some changes around here. He left without another word, and I sat alone in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his failures, wondering how I'd let things deteriorate this far. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Carven, this is Leora Ventral. I believe we should talk. Leora Ventral, Pierce's ex-wife, the woman he'd divorced 2 years ago to marry Lumi. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, when and where? The coffee shop Leora suggested was neutral territory, a small place downtown, far from our usual circles. I arrived first and chose a corner table where we could speak privately. I hadn't seen Pierce's ex-wife since their divorce proceedings, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Leora entered at exactly 3 o'clock, scanning the room with the same analytical precision I remembered. She was 31, with dark hair pulled back in a professional style and an understated elegance that Lumi's flashiness couldn't match. Where Lumi demanded attention, Leora commanded respect. Brooks, thank you for meeting me. She sat down across from me, declining my offer to buy her coffee. I'll get straight to the point. I know what happened at your Christmas dinner. How? Pierce called me yesterday. He was looking for support, validation, someone to tell him he was right to treat you that way. And did you? A slight smile crossed her face. I told him he was an entitled child who'd finally pushed too far. Then I hung up. I studied her expression. Why did you want to meet? Because I think we have mutual interests. Pierce is destroying something you built, and his behavior reflects on people who used to be associated with him, such as yourself, such as myself. She leaned forward slightly. Brooks, I know you probably have mixed feelings about me. The divorce wasn't pleasant, and I'm sure Pierce painted me as the villain. Pierce paints everyone as the villain when things don't go his way. Fair point. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. What did he tell you about why our marriage ended? That you grew apart. Different goals, different values. Leora nodded slowly. That's diplomatically put. The truth is, I couldn't watch him waste his potential anymore. Pierce has intelligence and charm when he chooses to use them, but he's never learned the difference between wanting something and earning it. You tried to change him. I tried to support him. There's a difference. She looked out the window for a moment. When we first got married, I thought his confidence was attractive. He had big plans, ambitious ideas. It took me 2 years to realize that planning and dreaming were as far as he ever got. What changed? I started my own consulting firm. Small business operations, efficiency analysis, staff development. I learned what real work looked like, what actual achievement felt like, and I realized Pierce had never experienced either. This was news to me. You have your own business? 3 years now, 22 clients across the region. I specialize in helping family businesses transition to professional management structures. The irony wasn't lost on me. Pierce never mentioned that. Pierce doesn't mention anything that might make other people seem more capable than he is. I sipped my coffee, processing this information. Leora, why are you telling me this? Because I think you're facing a decision about Pierce's future with your company, and I want you to know that there are alternatives. Such as? She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. I've been following Carven Restaurant Group's performance for the past year. Public records, industry reports, vendor feedback. You've built something impressive, but there are operational inefficiencies that could be addressed. She slid a document across the table. It was a preliminary analysis of our business, more thorough and insightful than anything Pierce had ever produced. You analyzed my company? I analyzed the public-facing aspects of your company. What I found was a solid foundation being undermined by inconsistent management practices. I read through her observations. She'd identified the exact problems I'd been noticing. The vendor issues, staff turnover, operational redundancies, but more than that, she'd proposed specific solutions. This is impressive work. It's what I do. Brooks, I'm not trying to insert myself into your family drama, but I am trying to build my business. If you're interested in professional consultation, I'd like to be considered. Even though it might put you in conflict with your ex-husband? Especially because it might put me in conflict with my ex-husband. Her expression hardened slightly. Pierce cost me 2 years of my life and nearly destroyed my confidence in my own judgment. If I can help you solve the problems he's created while building my own reputation, that seems like justice. I closed the folder and looked at her directly. What do you know about Pierce's current situation at work? I know he's been telling people you're stepping back and that he's taking over operations. I know he's made some questionable hiring decisions and that several of your long-term vendors are frustrated with him. How do you know that? Because 3 of those vendors have contacted me about consulting services. They're looking for someone to help them diversify their client base because they're not confident in your company's current direction. The implications hit me immediately. Pierce's mismanagement wasn't just internal. It was affecting our external relationships and reputation. What else do you know? I know Pierce has been networking with other restaurant owners, positioning himself as the future of Carven Restaurant Group. He's been making promises about expansion and modernization that he doesn't have the authority to make. What kind of promises? Exclusive supplier agreements, joint marketing ventures, location partnerships. Nothing illegal, but commitments that could become problematic if people expect follow-through. I felt a familiar anger building, but it was different from yesterday's emotional reaction. This was cold, analytical anger, the kind that led to strategic decisions rather than explosive confrontations. Leora, hypothetically, if someone wanted to make changes to their company's management structure, what would that process look like? She smiled, and I could see why Pierce had been attracted to her. When Leora smiled, it suggested intelligence and capability rather than just charm. Hypothetically, it would depend on the company's legal structure, employment contracts, and succession planning. But most family businesses have more flexibility than their owners realize. Even when family members are involved? Especially when family members are involved. Family relationships don't override business necessities or legal requirements. We talked for another hour. Leora explained her consulting process, shared case studies from similar situations, and outlined how professional management transitions typically worked. She was knowledgeable, practical, and refreshingly direct. "One more question," I said as we prepared to leave. "If I were to consider making changes, how would you handle the personal complications? Pierce is still your ex-husband." Pierce is a closed chapter in my personal life. Professionally, I'd treat him the same way I'd treat any underperforming manager, with fairness, documentation, and appropriate consequences. And if he doesn't handle that well? Then he'll learn what accountability looks like, something he should have learned years ago. I shook her hand as we parted ways. "I'll be in touch." "Brooks, one more thing. Whatever you decide to do it quickly. Pierce is already positioning himself as your successor. The longer you wait, the more complicated the transition becomes." That evening, I sat in my home office with Leora's analysis spread across my desk. Reina brought me dinner on a tray, something she only did when she sensed I was working through something important. "How was your day?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Educational. I met with Leora." Reina's eyebrows rose. "Pierce's ex-wife? Why?" I explained the conversation, Leora's business, and her analysis of our operational problems. Reina listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "What do you think of her?" I asked when I finished. I always liked Leora. She was good for Pierce, or tried to be. He wasn't ready for someone who challenged him to be better. "And now?" Reina was quiet for a long moment. "Now I think Pierce has made his choices, and we need to make ours. Even if it means taking action against our son?" "Brooks, after what happened yesterday, after what you discovered today, is he really acting like our son?" I looked at the broken pieces of our family dynamic scattered across my desk like puzzle pieces that no longer fit together. "No, he's not." "Then maybe it's time to stop treating him like one." That night, I made a decision. Not an emotional reaction, not a punishment, but a strategic business choice based on documented performance and clear evidence. I called Leora the next morning. "I'd like to hire you as a consultant. Can you start immediately?" "Yes. What's the first priority?" "I need a complete operational audit and a management transition plan. And Leora, I need this done quietly until we're ready to implement changes." "Understood. I'll have preliminary recommendations by Monday." "Perfect. And Leora, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get complicated before it gets simple." She was right about that, but sometimes complicated is the price of doing what should have been done years ago. Monday morning brought snow and clarity. While Reina handled the contractors repairing our dining room, I drove to the main office with Leora's preliminary report and a growing sense of purpose. The weekend had given me time to process the emotional aspects of the situation and focus on the business necessities. Leora was waiting in the lobby when I arrived, dressed in a sharp gray suit and carrying a leather portfolio that suggested serious professional intent. I'd given her building access and a temporary office space on Saturday, along with authorization to review operational documents. "How was your first weekend as a consultant?" I asked as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. "Illuminating. We need to talk privately before you see the full report." That didn't sound promising. My office occupied the corner of the building with windows overlooking the downtown district where I'd opened my first restaurant 26 years ago. The walls displayed photos from various milestones, grand openings, award ceremonies, community events, a visual history of everything I'd built. Leora sat across from my desk and opened her portfolio. "Brooks, the problems are worse than we discussed Friday." "How much worse?" She pulled out a thick folder. "Pierce has been using company resources for personal expenses. Nothing technically illegal, but ethically questionable and financially problematic." "Show me." The documentation was thorough and damning. Pierce had been charging personal dinners to business accounts, using company vehicles for non-work activities, and authorizing expense reimbursements for questionable purchases. Individually, the amounts were small. Collectively, they represented a pattern of treating company assets as personal resources. "How much are we talking about?" "Approximately $15,000 over the past year. But Brooks, the money isn't the real issue. It's what this behavior indicates about his judgment and integrity." I reviewed the receipts and expense reports. Dinners with Lumi at expensive restaurants charged as client meetings, with no documentation of actual clients. Gas purchases for Pierce's personal vehicle on weekends. Even a weekend getaway to a resort charged as a business development retreat. "How did you find this?" I cross-referenced expense reports with calendar entries and client records. Pierce has been sloppy about documentation, probably because he assumed no one would check. Who else knows about this? Currently, just me. But your accounting department has been processing these expenses without question, which suggests either poor oversight or willful ignorance. I made a note to review our financial controls. What else did you find? Leora pulled out another section of her report. Staff interviews reveal a pattern of favoritism, inconsistent policy enforcement, and declining morale. Pierce has been making promises about promotions and raises that he doesn't have authority to fulfill. Such as? He told Miles he'd be promoted to general manager by January. He promised Jennifer a raise to assistant manager level. He offered Jake Thompson a transfer to the downtown location with a salary increase. None of which he cleared with me. None of which are documented anywhere except in the employee's expectations. This was becoming a nightmare. Pierce hadn't just been mismanaging operations. He'd been making commitments that would force my hand or make me look like the villain for not honoring his promises. There's more, Leora continued. Pierce has been meeting with commercial real estate agents about potential expansion locations. He's told them he has authorization to explore new sites. He doesn't. I know, but they don't. 3 agents have prepared proposals for locations that would require significant capital investment. I leaned back in my chair, processing the scope of Pierce's unauthorized activities. Leora, in your professional opinion, how do we handle this? Carefully and quickly. Every day Pierce continues in his current role, he creates more complications. But if you move too fast without proper documentation, you risk wrongful termination claims or family court issues. Family court? Pierce is your son and a company employee. If he chooses to fight any disciplinary action, he could claim discrimination or unfair treatment. We need to build an airtight case based on performance metrics and documented policy violations. How long will that take? I need another week to complete the investigation and prepare the documentation. But Brooks, there's something else you need to consider. What? Pierce knows I'm here. He called me Saturday night. I felt a chill. What did he say? He accused me of trying to sabotage him out of spite over our divorce. He threatened to tell you that I was biased and couldn't be trusted. Are you biased? Leora met my eyes directly. Yes, I'm biased toward competence, accountability, and professional behavior. If that works against Pierce, so be it. What did you tell him? I told him that my contract was with you, not with him, and that he should focus on improving his performance instead of worrying about who might be evaluating it. How did he react? I hung up. But Brooks, he knows something is happening. He's going to start covering his tracks and possibly escalating his behavior. As if, on cue, my phone rang. Pierce. Dad, we need to talk. There are some rumors going around that I want to address. What rumors? That you've hired someone to investigate me, that you're looking for reasons to fire me. Where did you hear that? It doesn't matter where I heard it. What matters is whether it's true. I looked at Leora, who was listening intently. Pierce, I've hired a consultant to review our operational efficiency. That's standard business practice. And who is this consultant? Someone qualified to do the job. A pause. Dad, if you have problems with my performance, we should discuss them directly. Bringing in outside people to spy on family members is inappropriate. No one is spying on you. We're analyzing business operations. I want to meet with this consultant. I want to know what they're looking for and what they've been told about me. That's not necessary. It's necessary to me. Dad, I'm your son and a key member of this company. I have a right to know what's happening. I made a decision. Fine, come to my office at 2 o'clock. I'll be there. After I hung up, Leora shook her head. That wasn't wise. Why not? Because now he knows for certain that something is happening, and he has 4 hours to prepare his defense or create problems. What kind of problems? He could delete files, coach staff on what to say, or even preemptively quit and claim he was forced out. I hadn't considered those possibilities. What do you recommend? We accelerate the timeline. I need to finish the critical documentation today, and you need to make decisions about immediate next steps. Such as? Such as whether you're prepared to terminate Pierce's employment this week. The question hung in the air between us. Was I prepared to fire my own son? Leora, in your professional experience, is there any scenario where Pierce's behavior improves enough to justify keeping him? She was quiet for a moment, reviewing the files spread across my desk. Brooks, I've worked with dozens of family businesses facing similar situations. The ones that succeed are the ones where family members earn their positions through merit. The ones that fail are the ones where family relationships override business necessities. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. Pierce has had 3 years to demonstrate competence. Instead, He's demonstrated entitlement, poor judgment, and increasing hostility toward accountability. People don't change fundamental character traits, especially when they have never faced consequences for their behavior. So your professional recommendation is termination. My professional recommendation is that you prioritize the health of your business over the comfort of one employee, regardless of your relationship to that employee. At 2 o'clock, Pierce arrived at my office with Lumi in tow. I hadn't expected her, and her presence immediately changed the dynamic. Dad, I brought Lumi because this affects both of us. This is a business meeting, Pierce. Lumi isn't an employee. She's my wife and a stakeholder in our family's future. Lumi smiled in a way that suggested she'd been coaching Pierce on his approach. Brooks, we're all on the same side here. We just want to make sure there aren't any misunderstandings. I gestured for them to sit. Pierce, I'd like you to meet Leora Ventral, our operational consultant. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Pierce's face went white, then red. Lumi's mouth fell open. You hired my ex-wife to spy on me? Pierce's voice was barely controlled. I hired a qualified consultant to analyze our operations. This is unbelievable. Pierce struggled for words. This is betrayal. Leora spoke for the first time. Hello, Pierce. Lumi. Lumi found her voice first. I can't believe you would do this to your own family, Leora. I'm not doing anything to anyone. I'm performing a professional analysis of business operations. Pierce stood up abruptly. No, this is not happening. Dad, if you have problems with me, we discuss them as family. We don't bring in hostile outsiders to build cases against family members. Sit down, Pierce. I will not sit down. This is insane. You hired my bitter ex-wife to find fault with everything I do. Leora remained calm. Pierce, I'm not bitter. I'm professional. There's a difference. Professional? You're trying to destroy my career out of spite. Actually, Pierce, you've been destroying your career quite effectively without any help from me. That's when Pierce completely lost control. You vindictive witch! You couldn't stand that I found someone better than you, so now you're trying to poison my own father against me. Pierce, I stood up sharply. That's enough. But he was beyond reason now, pointing at Leora with shaking hands. She's lying about everything. Whatever she's told you, it's lies designed to make me look bad. Pierce, I haven't told your father anything that isn't documented in your own records. What records? What lies are you spreading? Leora opened her portfolio and pulled out a single expense report. This restaurant bill for $240, charged as a client meeting with potential investors. Would you like to explain who these investors were? Pierce glanced at the receipt, and his face went pale. That was a legitimate business expense. Really? Because the reservation was made under Lumi's name for a table for two on her birthday. The silence that followed was deafening. Pierce looked trapped, Lumi looked mortified, and I felt the last of my paternal protectiveness crumble away. Pierce, I said quietly, is there anything you'd like to explain? He looked around the room like a cornered animal, then straightened his shoulders in a gesture of false bravado. Fine. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. I quit. Pierce, don't... Lumi started. No, Lumi, I'm done. I'm done being treated like a criminal in my own family's business. I'm done being investigated and questioned and undermined. He pointed at me with genuine hatred. You want to choose her over your own son? You want to trust a vindictive ex-wife over family? Fine. But don't expect me to stick around and watch you destroy everything we've built together. Pierce, we haven't built anything together. I built this business. You've been employed by it. And now I'm not. Congratulations, Dad. You've chosen money over family, just like I always knew you would. He stormed toward the door, then turned back one final time. But this isn't over. You think you can just erase me and move on? You think you can replace me with her? He gestured at Leora. You'll regret this. Both of you will regret this. The door slammed behind them, leaving Leora and me alone with the echoes of Pierce's threats. Well, Leora said after a moment, that went better than expected. Better? He quit. That saves us the complications of termination procedures. I sat down heavily, feeling every one of my 58 years. Leora, what have I done? You've prioritized your business over enabling destructive behavior. It was the right choice. He's my son. He was your son. Right now, he's someone who just threatened you in your own office after being caught misusing company funds. She was right, but that didn't make it hurt less. What happens now? Now we move forward, and you have a business to run, and I have recommendations for how to run it better. Outside the windows, snow was falling heavier now, covering the city in white. A clean slate. A fresh start. But I had the feeling that Pierce's threats weren't empty, and that the real complications were just beginning. The next 2 weeks passed in deceptive calm. Pierce had cleaned out his office and returned his company keys without further contact. Leora had moved into a permanent consulting role, and her operational improvements were already showing results. Staff morale improved, vendor relationships stabilized, and our efficiency metrics reached levels I hadn't seen in years. But I should have known Pierce wouldn't disappear quietly. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when my phone rang at 6 a.m. Orion Bradley, my oldest friend and the owner of Bradley's Catering, sounded uncomfortable. "Brooks, we need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee this morning?" "What's wrong, Orion?" "Just, let's meet. The usual place. 8 o'clock. Orion and I had been friends for 15 years, ever since we'd started our businesses around the same time. We'd supported each other through economic downturns, family crises, and industry changes. If Orion was being evasive, something was seriously wrong. I found him at our regular corner table, looking older than his 62 years. He didn't smile when I sat down. "Orion, what's going on?" He sipped his coffee slowly before answering. "Brooks, I've known you for a long time. I've watched you build your business, raise your family, handle yourself with integrity in every situation. But I'm hearing some things that don't sound like the Brooks Carven I know." My stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "That you fired Pierce out of spite, that you hired his ex-wife specifically to build a case against him, that you've been looking for excuses to push him out so you could maintain total control." I stared at Orion, processing the implications. "Who told you that?" "Pierce called me last week. He was pretty upset, said you'd betrayed him and that he needed people to know the truth about what really happened." "And what truth is that?" Orion looked uncomfortable. "That you've never accepted his independence, that you sabotaged his marriage to Leora because you didn't want him to have outside loyalties, and that you're now using her to destroy his career." The twisted logic was breathtaking. Pierce had rewritten history so completely that he was now the victim of a years-long conspiracy. "Orion, did Pierce mention why Leora and I were reviewing his performance?" "He said you were looking for excuses to fire him because you couldn't stand sharing authority." "Did he mention the misused expense accounts, the operational failures, the vendor complaints?" Orion's expression shifted slightly. "He said those were minor issues that you blew out of proportion." I pulled out my phone and called Leora. "Can you email me the summary report we discussed yesterday? I'm sending it to Orion Bradley." "Brooks, just send it, please." Within minutes, Orion was reading through documented evidence of Pierce's misconduct. His face grew more troubled with each page. "Brooks, if this is accurate." "It's all documented. Receipts, emails, staff interviews, vendor complaints, everything." Orion set down the papers and looked at me directly. "Why didn't Pierce mention any of this?" "Because Pierce doesn't believe he did anything wrong. In his mind, company resources are family resources, and family rules don't apply to business standards. But some of this," Orion pointed to the expense reports, "this is basically theft, which is why he's no longer employed by my company." Orion was quiet for several minutes, rereading sections of the report. "Brooks, I owe you an apology. Pierce was very convincing, and I should have talked to you first." "Orion, Pierce is my son. Part of me will always love him, but I can't let that love destroy what I've built or hurt innocent people." "What innocent people?" I explained the staff promises Pierce had made without authorization, the vendor relationships he'd damaged, the expansion commitments that could have bankrupted us. By the time I finished, Orion looked sick. "How many other people has he called?" "I don't know, but I'm guessing you're not the only one." Orion nodded grimly. "He mentioned that he was reaching out to mutual friends, people who knew both of you. He said he wanted them to understand what really happened before you could spin the story." My phone rang. Janet Morrison from Morrison's Bakery, another longtime friend and business associate. "Brooks, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Here we go again. The pattern continued throughout the week. Friends, business associates, even some of my vendors called with variations of the same concerns. Pierce had been busy, systematically contacting everyone in our professional network with his version of events. His story was consistent. I was a controlling father who couldn't accept my son's independence. Leora was a vengeful ex-wife seeking revenge. Together we had conspired to destroy an innocent man who had only tried to modernize and improve the family business. Some people believed him initially. Others were skeptical but felt obligated to ask questions. A few saw through his manipulation immediately. The most painful call came from my brother Dean. Brooks, Pierce came to see me yesterday. He's really hurting. I'm sure he is. He says you chose business over family, that you've cut him off completely without any attempt to work things out. Dean, did Pierce tell you why he's no longer with the company? He said you had philosophical differences about business direction. Philosophical differences? I almost laughed. Dean, Pierce was stealing from the company. Not a lot, but consistently. He was making unauthorized commitments that could have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was alienating staff and vendors with his arrogance and incompetence. That doesn't sound like Pierce. It is Pierce. It's who he's become, maybe who he always was. Dean was quiet for a moment. Brooks, he's talking about taking legal action. What kind of legal action? Wrongful termination, breach of contract. He says he had implicit guarantees about his role in the business. He quit, Dean. He wasn't fired. He says he was forced to quit, that you created a hostile work environment designed to make him leave. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. Dean, whose side are you on here? I'm not on anyone's side. I'm trying to understand what happened to our family. What happened is that Pierce chose entitlement over responsibility, and I chose business survival over enabling his behavior. And Leora? How does she fit into this? Leora is a qualified consultant who's helping me fix the problems Pierce created. Pierce says you're having an affair with her. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. What? He says the consulting arrangement is a cover for a personal relationship, that you hired her to justify firing him so you could be with his ex-wife. Dean, that's insane. Is it? Brooks, you have to admit the optics are problematic. You fire your son and immediately hire his ex-wife. People are going to talk. Let them talk. Anyone who knows me knows better. Do they? Brooks, I've watched you become more distant from family over the years. More focused on business, less interested in relationships. Maybe Pierce has a point about your priorities. I ended the call feeling more isolated than I had since this whole situation began. Pierce wasn't just attacking my business decisions. He was attacking my character, my marriage, my fundamental integrity. That evening, I sat in my home office with Reina, sharing the day's developments. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. How many people has he called? She asked when I finished. I don't know, maybe dozens. He's being systematic about it. And what are you going to do? What can I do? I can't call everyone we know and defend myself against accusations. That would just make me look defensive and guilty. So you're going to let him destroy your reputation? I'm going to let the truth speak for itself. People who know me will see through his lies. People who don't know me well enough to see through them, maybe their opinions don't matter. Reina was quiet for a long moment. Brooks, there's something I need to tell you. What? Pierce called me yesterday. I felt a chill. What did he say? He wanted to know if you were having an affair with Leora. He said he had evidence of inappropriate meetings, suspicious behavior, financial arrangements that didn't make sense. What did you tell him? I told him he was sick for even suggesting such a thing, that he was my son, but that didn't give him the right to spread lies about his father. How did he react? He said I was naive, that successful men often had affairs with younger women, especially when their marriages had become routine. He said I should pay attention to how much time you're spending with Leora. I reached for Reina's hand. You know there's nothing... Of course I know. Brooks, I've been married to you for 26 years. I know who you are. But I'm worried about what this is doing to you, to us. Pierce is trying to destroy everything you've built, including our marriage. He won't succeed. Won't he? Brooks, how many friends have called you with questions? How many business relationships has he poisoned? How many people are now looking at your professional relationship with Leora and wondering? She was right. Pierce's campaign was working. Not because his accusations were true, but because doubt was easier to create than trust was to rebuild. What do you think I should do? I think you should fight back. Not with emotion, but with facts. Document everything. Build your case. Stop being reactive and start being strategic. That night, I made a decision. Pierce wanted to play hardball? Fine. But he was about to learn the difference between throwing accusations and building cases. I called Leora. We need to meet tomorrow morning. It's time to go on the offensive. What happened? Pierce is trying to destroy my reputation and my marriage. I'm done being defensive. What do you want to do? I want to document every lie he's told, every person he's contacted, every false accusation he's made, and then I want to systematically correct the record. Brooks, that could escalate things significantly. Things are already escalated. The question is whether I'm going to let Pierce control the narrative or whether I'm going to fight for the truth. Okay, I'll start preparing a comprehensive response strategy. Good. And Leora? Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. This is about to get much more complicated. She was right about that. But sometimes the only way out is through, and I was finally ready to stop retreating and start advancing. Pierce had made this personal. Now he was going to learn what that really meant. 3 weeks after Pierce's campaign began, I was ready to end it. Leora and I had spent countless hours documenting every false claim, every twisted fact, every person Pierce had contacted with his version of events. We had witnesses, recordings, financial records, and a timeline that painted a clear picture of systematic deception. But more importantly, we had a plan. The plan required patience, precision, and perfect timing. It also required one more Christmas dinner. I called Pierce on December 20th, exactly 1 year after he'd destroyed Reina's table. Pierce, I think it's time we talked, face to face. I have nothing to say to you, Dad. You made your choice. Actually, I think you have a lot to say. You've certainly had a lot to say to everyone else. A pause. What do you mean? I mean your phone calls to our friends, your accusations about Leora and me, your threats about legal action. I think it's time we discussed all of that directly. There's nothing to discuss. You betrayed your own family. Pierce, I'm inviting you and Lumi to Christmas dinner. One last conversation. After that, we can go our separate ways permanently. Why would I want to have dinner with you? Because I think you deserve the chance to say whatever you want to say to my face, and because I have some things to say to you. I could hear him breathing, considering. Pierce had never been able to resist an audience, especially when he thought he held the upper hand. Fine, but I'm bringing a witness. Bring whoever you want. Christmas Eve, 6 o'clock. We'll be there. Reina had rebuilt our dining room even more beautifully than before. The table was set for 5, Pierce, Lumi, Reina, myself, and one extra place setting that Pierce would assume was for a witness he was bringing. He was wrong about that. At exactly 6 o'clock, Pierce and Lumi arrived with Miles Weller, a lawyer Pierce had apparently retained for his threatened legal action. Weller was a small, nervous man who looked uncomfortable being dragged into a family dinner. Dad, this is Miles Weller, my attorney. I wanted him to witness whatever you're planning to say. Of course. Please, everyone sit down. Pierce chose the head of the table again, positioning himself as the dominant figure in the room. Weller sat to his right, Lumi to his left. I took my usual place at the other end, with Reina beside me. Before we eat, Pierce began, I want to say something. Actually, Pierce, I'd prefer to eat first. We can talk over dessert. No, I want to get this over with. I want to say what I came here to say. I nodded to Reina, who began serving the meal she'd spent 2 days preparing. Pierce ignored the food and launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. Dad, for the past month, I've been telling people the truth about what you did to me, about how you conspired with my ex-wife to destroy my career, about how you chose money and control over family loyalty. Is that what you've been telling people? It's what happened. You couldn't stand that I was becoming independent, that I had my own ideas about how to run the business, so you found an excuse to get rid of me. Miles Weller looked increasingly uncomfortable as Pierce's voice rose. And now you're having an affair with Leora, using company money to pay for your relationship while destroying my reputation in the business community. Pierce, Reina said quietly, that's enough. No, Mom, it's not enough. He needs to hear what people are saying about him. He needs to know that his lies aren't working. Lumi nodded supportively. Pierce has been very hurt by all of this. We just want him to get the respect he deserves. I set down my fork and looked at Pierce directly. Are you finished? I'm finished when I say I'm finished. Then please, continue. What else would you like to accuse me of? Pierce seemed surprised by my calm response. He'd expected anger, defensiveness, emotional reactions he could exploit. I want you to admit what you did. I want you to acknowledge that you fired me because you were jealous of my success. Your success? My innovations, my leadership, my connection with the staff. Pierce, in your 3 years with the company, you alienated 12 employees, damaged relationships with 6 vendors, and cost us approximately $30,000 in waste and poor decisions. That's not true. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Actually, it's completely true and documented. Miles Weller leaned forward slightly, his professional instincts engaged despite the awkward setting. Pierce, you've spent the past month telling people that I fired you out of jealousy and that I'm having an affair with Leora. You've accused me of conspiracy, fraud, and betrayal. Because that's what happened. Really? Miles, would you like to see the documentation of Pierce's actual performance? Before Weller could answer, Pierce stood up abruptly. I don't care about your fake documentation. I know what you did. Sit down, Pierce. I will not sit down. You can't order me around anymore. You're right, I can't. But you're in my house, and you'll show respect or you'll leave. Pierce remained standing, his face flushed with anger. You want respect? You should have thought about that before you chose her over your own son. That's when the doorbell rang. Pierce looked confused. Who's that? That would be our other dinner guest. I walked to the front door and opened it to reveal Leora, dressed in a black wool coat, carrying a briefcase and looking every inch the professional consultant she was. Good evening, Brooks. Sorry I'm late. When I returned to the dining room with Leora, Pierce's face had gone completely white. His hands were trembling slightly, and he seemed to have trouble breathing. Hello, Pierce. Lumi. Miles. Pierce stared at her like she was a ghost. What? What is she doing here? She's joining us for dinner. Please, Leora, sit down. Leora took the empty chair across from Pierce, setting her briefcase beside her plate. Thank you for including me. I know this is a family dinner. You're not family, Lumi said sharply. No, I'm not. I'm a business consultant who's been working with Brooks to clean up some operational problems. Pierce finally found his voice. You planned this. Both of you. We planned to have a conversation, yes. This is a setup. Miles, they're trying to intimidate me. Weller looked around the table uncertainly. Perhaps I should leave. This seems like a family matter. No, I said firmly. Stay. You should hear this. Leora opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Pierce, for the past month, you've been calling people with some very serious accusations. I thought you might want to see the actual facts. I don't want to see anything from you. Unfortunately, what you want isn't really relevant anymore. She slid a document across the table. This is a record of every phone call you've made, every person you've contacted, and every accusation you've leveled against your father and me. Pierce's hands were shaking more noticeably now. How did I document your defamation campaign? The same way I documented your misuse of company funds, your operational failures, and your abuse of authority. Carefully and thoroughly. Miles Weller was reading over Pierce's shoulder, his expression growing more concerned with each page. Pierce, Weller said quietly, some of these statements could be considered defamatory. They're not defamatory if they're true, Pierce said, but his voice lacked conviction. Leora pulled out another document. This is a recording of your conversation with Orion Bradley, where you accused Brooks of having an affair with me and using company funds to pay for personal services. Pierce's face went from white to gray. You can't record phone calls without consent? Actually, in this state, I can, and I did. She placed a small recording device on the table. Would you like to hear yourself accusing your father of fraud, conspiracy, and adultery? Or would you prefer to hear the conversation where you told Janet Morrison that Brooks was mentally unstable and shouldn't be trusted with business decisions? Pierce looked around the table desperately. Miles, they can't do this. This is harassment. Weller was studying the documents with professional focus. Pierce, did you make these statements? The context was, did you make these statements, yes or no? Pierce's composure finally cracked completely. Yes, but they deserved it. They destroyed my career. They conspired against me. With what evidence? Leora asked calmly. I don't need evidence. I know what happened. Actually, Pierce, you do need evidence, especially when you're accusing people of crimes. I leaned forward. Pierce, you've spent the past month trying to destroy my reputation, my marriage, and my business relationships. You've told lies to dozens of people, made accusations you can't support, and threatened legal action based on fantasy. It's not fantasy. Then prove it. Show Miles one piece of evidence that supports any of your claims. Pierce looked around the table like a trapped animal. I don't have to prove anything to you. Actually, you do. Leora pulled out a final document. Because we're filing defamation charges against you on Monday. The silence that followed was absolute. Pierce stared at the legal papers, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, fear. You can't sue me. I'm your son. Pierce, you stopped being my son the moment you chose to destroy innocent people rather than take responsibility for your own failures. Miles Weller cleared his throat. Brooks, what exactly are you seeking? A public retraction of every false statement Pierce has made, documented apologies to every person he contacted with lies, and a legal agreement that he will cease all contact with my employees, vendors, and business associates. And if he refuses? Then we proceed with the defamation suit, the fraud investigation, and the criminal charges for theft of company funds. Pierce finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Criminal charges? Leora nodded. Misuse of company funds is theft, Pierce. The amounts involved qualify as felony charges. Pierce looked at Miles Weller desperately. Can they do this? Weller reviewed the documents one more time before answering. Pierce, based on what I'm seeing here, they have a very strong case. Multiple strong cases, actually. Pierce's world was collapsing in real time. The confident, entitled man who had walked into my house an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the consequences of his choices. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. I want you to tell the truth, I said, to everyone you lied to. I want you to take responsibility for your failures instead of blaming other people, and I want you to disappear from my life permanently. Pierce looked around the table one more time, at Reina, who was watching with sad resignation, at Lumi, who was staring at the legal documents in horror, at Miles Weller, who was clearly calculating the costs of defending the indefensible, at Leora, who represented everything Pierce could have been if he'd chosen competence over entitlement. Finally, he looked at me. I'll sign whatever you want me to sign. Good. Miles, you can review the settlement terms tomorrow. Pierce has 48 hours to begin the retraction process. Pierce stood up slowly, his earlier bravado completely gone. Dad, Goodbye, Pierce. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one final time. You'll regret this. Someday, you'll regret choosing business over family. Pierce, I said quietly, I regret that it came to this, but I don't regret protecting innocent people from someone who was willing to destroy them rather than face the truth about himself. The door closed behind them, leaving Reina, Leora, and me alone in the dining room. Well, Reina said after a moment, that went better than expected. Leora smiled. Much better. He could have fought the charges, made this drag on for months. What happens now? I asked. Now Pierce learns what accountability looks like, and you get your life back. 6 months later, Pierce had completed his court-mandated retractions and disappeared from our professional circles entirely. The business was thriving under Leora's operational improvements. Our friends and associates had heard the truth and understood what had really happened. Most importantly, Reina and I were rebuilding our family traditions, just the two of us, with occasional visits from people who had earned their place at our table through respect, competence, and integrity. Pierce had been right about one thing. Family is important, but real family doesn't demand loyalty at the expense of truth, and love doesn't require enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction, even when that someone is your own child.